Hey, my name is PolishLynx and welcome to Dejection, an ode from ebi-hime. So basically this is the game that contains the characters from Asphyxia. I think that was the title of the game, and I believe Dejection and Ode was released as the first one, so I'm going to play this right now. And the other one is was released on Steam, so I will need to get to it later, and that will for sure happen to continue the series, I guess. So yeah, let's begin Dejection and Ode. You are going to get tired of me someday. Please stop saying things like that. It is depressing. But it's the truth. Everybody does, even eventually. Perhaps they get tired of you because you keep saying silly things like that. Perhaps. The two women sat together, only a hair's breadth away from the other. Oh yeah, I didn't mention it, right? But well, I guess if you know ebi-hime's productions, then you would know that this is a Yuri game, basically. We played one game from her before, and it was on Steam, and yeah. On Steam, what I'm talking... Yeah, well, it was on Steam as well, but what I meant is that it is on the channel. So yeah. Their hands resting against the ground were so close they were almost touching. Almost being the key word. No matter how close they became, it seemed as though there was always something in the way. Not necessarily physical distance, for that was certainly a part of it, but maybe it was something about Lillian. The way she carried herself was so different to Samantha. Lillian was a tall, striking woman, her hair shockingly blonde. I think I like Samantha more. Still. She brushed her hair with an almost religious fervor, 100 strokes before bed, and then in the morning once she'd first woken. Even when she felt depressed, she would still find the time in her schedule to tend to her hair, brushing and brushing until it crackled. According to Lillian, the mere act of brushing was relaxing. She enjoyed the repetitive motions, finding comfort in the self-imposed order it established. But Samantha wasn't like that. When she felt depressed, she could hardly even bring herself to get out of bed in the mornings. Sunlight supposedly brought clarity. It represented new beginnings. But to Samantha, all it represented was headaches, misery, and a desperate desire to curl up under her covers and snatch a few more minutes of sleep. Yeah. So I guess the personality would fit more. When Samantha was depressed, her hair was never neat. Not that it was most of the time anyway. She could not, see the point. Why bother making her exterior look presentable where interior so often felt as though it was being crushed under a wave of an invisible, impending doom? A fear that she would never amount to anything, never achieve anything, never mean anything to anyone. Not even to Lillian, her supposed closest friend. Was that the reason that no matter how intimate their friendship, sometimes it felt as though they were unable to truly understand one another? Was there something fundamentally different between the two of them that would someday drive a wedge into the relationship impossible to surmount? It could be. It sounded plausible, at any rate. Samantha had been thinking about this a lot lately. Sometimes she wondered whether she enjoyed thinking about unhappy things. Maybe she did it because she did not like herself very much. Certainly not as much as she liked Lillian.
Lillian! What is it? If you were to leave me, I would truly miss you. Are you still talking about that? Yes! I fear I must talk about it, for it is what I have been thinking about. I have been able to think of it little less else. Then desist, if not for my peace of mind, then your own. The discourse is completely pointless.
When Lillian looked at her like that, she so closely resembled a school madam. Samantha wondered whether she should bow her head and say, "Yes, miss." That kind of playful exchange would probably only annoy Lillian. And then Samantha would feel bad for trying her patience.
Samantha, are you paying attention? I apologize. It appears as though I was lost in thought. You always are, and that is precisely why you are so often unhappy. You think yourself into misery, and then are unable to think yourself out of it. Yes, Lillian.
Like a naughty schoolgirl, Samantha let her head hang.
Can you try and focus on a more cheerful topic? It is a beautiful day, and it seems a shame to waste it. I know. I agree, and often I do find our walks enjoyable. But? It can be difficult. I'm not always a particularly joyful person, you see. I see that clearly enough, Samantha, and I do understand.
For a few moments, Samantha was tempted to rejoin but she decided it would be pointlessly inflammatory, childish even. She did not wish to annoy Lillian more than she already had done.
However, no matter how hard it gets, you must try. You cannot allow yourself to simply give up. Human beings are supposed to be creatures of free will, are they not? You do not need to succumb when you feel unhappy. You can move past it. That is what free will is about. But being happy is who I am. I cannot move past it because then I will become somebody else. Somebody who I'm not. And that is precisely why I cannot help but think you will leave me, because I can be an exceedingly difficult person, and my gloomy moods will probably serve to alienate you at some point or another, if not today, then next week, next month, next year. I know this to be true, because I would leave myself if I could, dear Lillian.
Oh. Not good. Samantha pressed her hand against the ground. Fingers played out, feeling the gentle cold cares of the morning dew against her skin. It should have been comforting, and most of the time it was. Samantha often felt more at home amongst the flowers and the trees, surrounded by the song of the birds, than she did with other human beings, illogical creatures who expected her to conform to all their societal norms, as though she owed them something simply for being born. The bark of the trees and the petals of the flower had no such lofty designs. Instead, they were simply content to be allowing Samantha to be with them, existing for the sake of existing. But right now, Samantha could not draw any kind of pleasure from her surroundings.
As a human being, I do have a natural desire for self-preservation. I do not wish to feel pain, even though I often do, and I do not wish for you to leave me, because you are the closest friend I have. However, these fears lead me to voice my worries to you, and it is during these moments where I share my anxieties that I feel I annoy you the most. So you see, it is like a vicious cycle. Everything leaves me feeling more miserable than before. Wherever I look, I see misery. Even the leaves on the trees, the clouds in the sky, seem dull and grey, and sometimes I just don't know what to do. Sam.
Lillian's eyes softened. slightly less steely now than once they were. Although Lillian was a stern person, strikingly austere with her pristine clothes, silken hair and a tiny cursive handwriting that never descended into illegibility, no matter how long she had been writing, she did care about Samantha, despite her better judgment. Even though throwing her away would be far easier.
Eh?
Samantha giggled softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle breeze. Use my nickname! You haven't in a while?
Well, I just thought you'd be nice change of page.
Hey, you say that, but that is not the truth, is it? Her face flashing, Lillian turned her head away, nose and upturned like a finicky cat, okay. Once again, nose upturned like a finicky cat's. Samantha had always had an affinity for cats. Their little bodies, lit bodies, intelligent eyes, unpredictable personalities. She enjoyed the sense of chaos that surrounded them, the possibility that for docile one moment they could suddenly spring, pouncing on a mouse, a bird, a human hand, rending it asunder with their claws. Cats were the domesticated force of some of the most sublime creatures to have been crafted by God. After all, the stately lion and the prowling tiger. Lillian, on the other hand, was less keen. That was another difference between them. Samantha was a cat person, but Lillian had always preferred dogs. I like Lillian even more and more. All dependables, man's best friend.
I do not know what you mean. You are reading too much into it.
So say, but I have been blessed with the honor of knowing you intimately for almost 2 years now, my dear Lillian, and I know you are a creature of habit. You enjoy routine and would never casually break away from it, not for no reason. Lillian's back stiffened.
You called me that because you care about me.
Is that true?
Of course I care about you. You are one of my closest companions too.
Other than your brother, of course?
Theodore is different. He's family, and one must take good care of one's family.
Even though you try to act cool and elevated above such petty concerns, you can be surprisingly soft, Lily.
Please refrain from calling me Lily. I resent it.
But you just called me Sam.
That is not the same.
Why?
Because you... Well...
You think that I'm less proper than you? Less of a real human being, with no valid thoughts or feelings.
Is that why only I deserve a silly diminutive? I never said that you were not real human. It is your baseless conjecture, not mine.
But sometimes your thoughts are too difficult for me to comprehend.
It is almost as though they
they flit from place to place with no rhyme or reason, like a butterfly or a bee.
It does get quite noisy in here sometimes, I'll admit. For you would not know by hearing it.
Smiling self-deprecatingly, Samantha knocked on her head with her knuckles.
See? It sounds hollow. Completely empty. If only that were the case, then I may be a happy woman. They do say ignorance is bliss after all.
Against her better judgment, Lillian started to laugh. She was unable to stop herself. Only Samantha was able to draw these extremes of emotions out of her, be it anger, anxiety, or genuine joy. With one hand pressed against her mouth, she giggled, shoulders shaking.
And yet,
her laughter abating, Lillian returned, hesitantly, to their original point of conversation. This always happened when she was with Samantha. Conversations became derailed. The dark and brooding turned into the light airy, then back again, In such rapid succession, it was hard for her to keep abreast of it. The end result was dizzying, disorienting, like being shaken back and forth, roughly by the shoulders.
I do want to support you, Samantha, and I believe you have a great deal of talent. You are an intelligent woman, and you deserve to become well known. But when we converse together, I sometimes feel so lost. You talk at great length about thoughts and feelings that seem unhealthy, feelings that I cannot comprehend no matter how hard I try. Hey, I knew it. I really am a difficult person, aren't I? Yes, you are. I cannot dress this fact up in a more palatable light, for it is the truth. Take our conversation today, for instance. I assumed that you were unhappy. Your face was worn, your frame doubled over like some poor beggar woman's. It looked as though you would not smile again. However, you started to laugh, quite suddenly too. It is not something I can wrap my head around.
Well, Samantha stretched, linking her fingers together and extending her arms so the bones at her wrists and elbows clicked.
I was sad because I was worried you would leave me. Yet, to my astonishment, you happened to call me by that old nickname, catching me entirely off guard. It was such a small matter that suited your heart? Indeed. But how? Because to me, it was no small matter.
Smiling, Samantha placed a hand against her breast, holding it lightly above her heart.
To me, it was a sign. A measure of love, your love, and affection for me, which has continued to grow, despite the more troubling aspects of my personality that seeked to impede it. And so, after hearing such a sweet epithet fall from your lips, I know I no longer have any cause for worry. For the moment, anyway.
Lillian shook her head in evident bemusement, brushing a few strands of hair away from her eyes as she did so.
How funny. Does my opinion really mean that much to you? Yes. Your esteem of me is of the utmost importance. If you did not care for me anymore, I fear I should die. Come now, we both know that isn't true. Did you not say the exact same thing of Roberta Sophie before you had that falling out? It was not a mere falling out. You make us sound like children. It was a difference of political opinion. It could not remain close companions with somebody who was seriously attempting to advocate slavery. Moreover, that was different. Roberta was different. I see now with the gift of hindsight that our friendship was perhaps not as close as I had first imagined. Although I still wish to be Roberta's acquaintance, our relationship is no longer as all-consuming. I feel our personalities are mismatched. My feelings for you, however, are sincere. I know I could never stop liking you, Lillian, no matter what. Well, let us hope they prove to be more sincere than your feelings for Simon Fricker, at least. Me. Pray tell, just how is your husband nowadays? I hope he's faring well.
Samantha pulled a face, as though she'd just bitten into an apple to discover a worm wriggling within it. Her look of disdain was so incredibly obvious, Lillian could not help but snort.
Oh yeah. That person. That person being your husband? Yeah. Husband meaning the man you are married to until death do you part. Oh God.
Samantha groaned, pressing her hands against her face.
Please do not talk about that. It was an incredibly foolish move, and I have regretted it every moment since.
It had been such a long time since Samantha had seen her husband. She could hardly even remember what his face looked like, which to her was nothing short of a blessing.
You can be such a sadist at times, Lillian, deriving pleasure from my suffering like that. Me? A sadist? Yeah, an uncommonly cruel one. And yet you continue to spend time with me. Does that make you a masochist?
Indeed I am, of the highest degree. Okay. Didn't see that coming.
Well, at least you are honest about it. You truly are a fickle being, always jumping from one flight of offense to the next, and then abandoning it whenever you lose interest. Sometimes, Sam, I feel like not even you yourself know what you really think. Yes, that is probably a fair assessment, but I will expect nothing else from you, Lillian. Your eye is far more discerning than mine. Maybe that's because you only care to write about the fantastical and the fanciful instead of more down-to-earth issues. Perhaps, but penning poems on the struggles of the common man sounds impossibly dull to me. I'm not particularly interested in tilling the soil or tending the crops. Only pirate ships filled with reanimated cadavers. Hehe, how could you tell? It was easy. You can be a fairly simple person sometimes. Hey! My works are very deep and symbolic, actually. There are even morals in them, if you would care to look. How would this moral, perchance, be do not take excessive amounts of opium? Blah. In a most uncouth manner for a young lady. Not that she cared much for the conduct of young ladies, Samantha stuck out her tongue and gave Lillian a small shove. Lillian exhaled haughtily and pressed her hands up to her hair, taking great pains to rearrange her bonnet. Once she was sure everything was in place, where it belonged, she drove her hand back down to her lap, directing a less than impressed glare in her friend's direction. You do know, if you poke your tongue out like that, a passing crow may happen to see it and steal it away. As if I would allow such thing! Without my tongue, I would no longer be able to torment you, Lillian. Oh, I believe you are selling yourself short there, dear friend. Even without the power of speech, I'm sure you would be able to find no less than 100 ways to continue vexing me. I do not deliberately attempt to annoy you, Van. It just happens. Then it is all the more remarkable that you do such a good job at it. I do not know whether I should be flattered or not by your words. Oh, I am conflicted. You are always conflicted. True. You know me too well. And yet, at the same time, Samantha wondered whether Lillian really knew anything about her at all. Sometimes Samantha's creativity seemed to know no bounds, flowing from her every pore like water from a stream. At other times, however, she would sit at her desk for hours and not pick her pen up once, instead running her hands through her hair with so much force that she almost tore handfuls of it out. Unfortunately, today was one of the latter days. Samantha's brain was full to bursting, not with ideas or inspiration, but a noxious cloud of thick black smoke. She felt that her head was rather too small to contain such a large amount of acrid pollution, and her temples pulsed, almost threatening to split open, like skin stretched taut around a rotten fruit. Lillian, on the other hand, was prim and proper as ever, not a patch of mold to be seen. Her hair, brushed 100 times no doubt, fell about her shoulders like a blonde halo, framing her face. The material of her dress was smooth, with no telltale crinkles or creases from where it may have been hastily thrown to the floor before going to bed the previous day, and was devoid of splotches of ink. She sat upright, her back straight, legs crossed in a manner fitting of a duchess, or something like that. Her hand moved across her page in a uniform, regular manner, pausing only occasionally as she pondered what to write next. Could it really be that, in this confusing world with all its contradictory laws, it was possible to sit in silence and focus on a single chore? Samantha could not imagine it, and she was very good at imagining things. The world was far too big, and even pausing to ponder it for a single moment
made her feel so dizzy she felt she had to lie down. Sometimes, Samantha wondered whether she even qualified as a human, given how strange and inexplicable many of their actions were to her. Why, then, had she believed she could ever write something that would reach the common man, when she could not even understand them? Despite Lillian's reassurances, Samantha was sure she had no talent. She was no poet, just a silly girl, swept along too easily by her own fancies. She had not been able to complete her university degree. She could not complete any poetry. Sometimes, when conversing with others, she was even incapable of completing her own sentences, her mind drifting off to places her voice could not follow. Samantha groaned, pressing her hands against her head. She did not even have the energy to support it anymore. Her neck felt strangely slender, brittle, almost twig-like, ready to snap at the softest touch. Her eyes buzzed in her head, as though freshly drawn from a blazing furnace. Her throat was sore, her body cold and racked with shivers, much like the idiot children and elderly woman Lillian wrote about. It hurt. Everything hurt, and Samantha was tired of it.
"'Tis all waste of time,"
Samantha uttered in under her breath, but still Lillian heard, setting her pen to one side and lifting her head.
"Samantha." "Hey! It is all impossible, completely impossible! I cannot think in here at all, it is far too stiffly." "Then perhaps you should do something about it." "What do you mean? Do something? What if I can't do something?" "You can always do something, Samantha. This only stops being valuable when you are dead." "You are even the realist, my dear Lillian." "I have to be a realist. Somebody needs to keep hold of you, else I fear you would drift right off the face of the earth. I believe I may prefer that." "You might, but for me, it is not an option." "What is an option then?" "A walk." "A walk?" "Yes. Perhaps you could take a turn by the lake. It is rather pleasant during this time of year."
Samantha wrinkled her nose in disdain.
"Why? What's the use? It may help you happen upon some new inspiration. I myself always find it easiest to compose whilst walking. Poetry is not a static art, snug not on the page after all. It moves through the mind of the reader, each carefully chosen word propelling them forwards to new levels of understanding."
This was certainly true. Lillian would often compose her poetry during their walks together, reciting snatched verses here and there to Samantha as they came into her head. Being able to watch Lillian as she worked was a great honor to Samantha, who delighted to hear how this raw poetry, churned up from the earth, would come to her friends' minds, falling from her lips like beds of dew, clinging to the underside of paper-thin petals and blades of grass. Lillian would hold these fragments of poetry in her mind as she walked, then recite them to Theodore once she returned home, often employing Theodore as her copywriter to pen down her poems, light, ethereal, into more solid concrete forms that could not slip away. On this particular day, however, Theodore's attentions had been otherwise disposed, occupied with visiting a close friend, whom he had not seen since his move to Somerset with his older sister. Lillian peered at Samantha, blinking once, twice, in a strangely studious manner that a medical student might reserve for examining the dissected corpse of an executed murderer.
"And besides, you do look somewhat piggy."
"I feel piggy. In fact, I think I may be dying."
"Don't be ridiculous. You have made this grim diagnostic multiple times over the last 2 years, and it has never proven to be true." "No, not yet at least. Your lack of creative inspiration does not mean you are dying, Samantha. But I am a poet, Lillian. Or at least I aspire to be. Writing's what I live for. Ink runs in my blood. If I cannot pursue my poetry, what other use do I have? I might as well die. Right here. Right now. You are being silly. You always act like this. Whenever you have a bad day, you act as though you will never know happiness again. But that is not true. All emotions are merely momentary. If you deign to take a walk with me, I'm sure your spirit will greatly improve. No, that isn't right. You don't understand. You just don't understand, Leon. It is not just about having a bad day. I'm sorry, Leon, but in my current state, I fear no amount of walking would help alleviate my anxieties, even if I were to take a turn around the Caspian Sea. If only I were not so incompetent. Then maybe I would still be able to create something glorified. You are not incompetent. At least.
Lillian looked Samantha up and down. The younger woman was slumped forwards against her desk, supporting her in her hands, elbows resting against the wood. Her face was ghostly pale, offset only by the dark rings underneath her eyes. Her hair was completely disheveled, more fitting for one of Rousseau's noble savages than an English lady. Although she looked utterly exhausted, her body twitched with nervous energy. Like a rabbit's, her shoulders shaking, chest rising and falling in an entirely exaggerated manner. You are not incompetent in terms of writing. When it comes to taking care of yourself, however. Huh? Why should I care what I do to my body? Without the ability to write, my flesh is as cold as that of a corpse. If you were to cut off my arm, you would find sawdust instead of blood. I believe I will abstain from the amputation, for the moment at least. It seems like an unnecessarily messy way to resolve this melancholy turn of yours. Melancholy does not even begin to describe it. My feelings are so vast they cannot be depicted with the meager supply of words we writers have on hand. With one of her pained groans, which she typically reserved for the topic of her husband, Samantha let her hands fall from her face, throwing them into the air in a gesture of complete surrender. Why did I ever have designs of becoming a poet? I am not equipped to truly discuss the feelings which can capture a human heart. Nobody is. The task is impossible. You are only saying that because you are in a bad way. Come, a walk may still do you good. No! I have refused the offer once, and I do not mean to refuse it again. You can understand how I feel, Lillian, so please don't attempt to explain or rationalize. My emotions at the present are beyond your sphere of control, and they are not something you can change. So that is how it is it? All of a sudden, Lillian's eyes lost their luster, becoming cold and hard, like marble set into a circled warm flesh. Rising from her seat, Lillian planted her hands against her hips. Amy, can this please look in her junior's direction? Why must you attempt to punch me simply for trying to console you? Is it that you dislike me? No, I could never dislike you. Not even if you were to strike me or spit on me. I would love you all the same. And yet you consistently try to my patience. Sometimes I wonder whether you enjoying upsetting me. You seem the type to take pleasure in something that perverse. No, that isn't it at all. Please, Leon, you are misunderstanding. Eyes wide, lashes trembling. Samantha clasped her hands together, eyes upturned towards Leon, standing over her with a scowl on her face. Well then, Samantha, if you would be so kind, would you mind laying out your thought process so a foolish person like myself can understand? I mean. All wind gone from her sails. Her earlier sense of her self-entitlement abating, Samantha could only slump back against her chair, its legs scraping across the floor like nails across a slate. I'm sorry, Lillian. I did not mean to get mad at you.
and I'm not trying to make your life difficult. Really, truly, I'm not. It is not my intention. Yet you continue to do a wonderful job. Perhaps I should applaud you. Please, do not take such a harsh tone with me. I do not know whether I can bear it. I fail to see why I should be gentle when you only scorn my attempts at comfort. Are you truly so self-centered, Samantha? You believe that only you are capable of experiencing pain? That you and you alone know what it is to suffer? No, that wasn't...
Samantha bit her lower lip, averting her gaze guiltily.
I've not been to snap at you. Honestly, I do not. Please believe me when I tell you that. However, sometimes my mind, it just feels so out of order. As for somebody other, myself regularly goes rummaging through it and rearranges things without my knowledge. Perhaps when I'm asleep, or during the moments where I become entranced by daydreams. I do not know. At times my mind overflows with inspiration. I feel as if I could do anything. Anything! I feel almost like a bird, flying above the heads of others, on pure white wings. And yet, mere seconds later, all these emotions will drain away, leaving me with nothing. Just the cold, dead carcass of a baby bird lying by the trunk of an old oak tree. Sometimes I'm the bird that flies, yet most of the time I feel as though I have more in common with the corpse, the home for the worm and the maggot. The worm and the maggot, you say? That is right. Was there something wrong with my example? No, nothing wrong. For perhaps a bit hackneyed? Hehehe. You see, this is why I'm unable to write any verse in my current state of mind. I'm far too uninspired. Well, I suppose it was not too bad. Slightly too girlish for my liking though. Hey, come with it, Lily. I know how much you used to like the gothic too. Especially when you were a teenager. Yeah, well, those were not my best pieces of work, I'll admit. That's right, I would hope I have grown out of that phase by now. At least to some extent. You, on the other hand, seem to embrace this love of the strange and the sickly with both arms open wide. Perhaps you have been reading too much Radcliffe. Well, it's very popular. I thought my dead bird analogy would help resonate with the times we currently live in, you see.
Samantha giggled weakly, even though she had determined to be angry with Samantha. Lillian found her resolve beginning to crumble away. How could she remain mad with such a silly girl, who knew the full extent of her own silliness and yet knew not how to cure it? Constantly moving between one state of mind and another, often with no real warning. It gets hard. It gets really, really hard. Often I don't know whether I should help or laugh or cry. Sometimes I do both at the same time. Yet when the tragic and comic are both together, both start to lose their meaning. Like Romeo and Juliet, you mean? Yeah, exactly. It is not one of Shakespeare's greatest achievements, I will admit. The comic moments are at ill harmony with the rather more serious content, which results in a rather disjointed experience. However, I'm still rather partial to it all the same. You'll be contrary creature that you are. Indeed. Perhaps the confusion resonates with me. My head is full with far too many things. Things that I cannot even begin to name. Samantha whimpered, pressing her hands against either side of her head. I'm sorry, Lillian. I know I must be burdened to you, but I literally thought if we worked together, maybe I would be able to move past this. I had this feeling the very first time I saw you, that you could become something irreparably precious to me. My muse. Samantha averted small smile in this suitable, shame-faced. Of course, I'm sure my old tutor, Reverend Boyer, would balk at such a baseless supposition,
of my part. She always was unapologetically harsh on those who used metaphor and imagery in poetic words with no base of common. She was of prompt to say muse. That is an uncommonly lofty manner to refer to the good-looking farmer's son, Miss Coleridge. Heh.
Samantha giggled, dipping her head to hide behind her hair.
But perhaps I was mistaken. I was simply using you as a convenient container in which to hold all my own desires. I didn't know, as I do now, that my Lillian has an awfully short temper and does not suffer fools gladly. She does not exist so that others may draw inspiration from her, for she is far, far more talented than I am myself. I see it now clearly. I am the one who depends upon you, whereas you could simply leave me tomorrow, if the mood struck you. Your work would not suffer from it. But when faced with even the slight possibility that you might go, I found myself unable to write a single word.